When the US declared war on alcohol in 1920 under the 18th Amendment, it didn't kill crime. It created a billion-dollar underworld, and one man ruled it all: Al Capone. He wasn't just another gangster, he was the king of crime. Capone lived by one rule: why fight when you can bribe? At his peak, he was pulling in $100 million a year, over $1.6 billion today. But on paper, he was just a man with no real job and no taxable income. The FBI had no choice. With no evidence of his crimes and no witnesses willing to testify, Capone seemed untouchable. That is, until forensic accounting took him down for something unexpected: taxes. The IRS exposed $215,000 in unpaid taxes, over $3 million today, proving his lavish lifestyle didn't match his reported income. A decade of crime, erased with a single audit. But here's the thing: Capone may have fallen, but his methods didn't. The money laundering tricks he pioneered, fake businesses, offshore accounts, and hidden payrolls, are still used today by criminals, corrupt politicians, and even Fortune 500 companies. This is the story of how Al Capone ran his business, laundered millions, and nearly got away with it all. And you're watching The Money Game. Alphonse Al Capone wasn't born into power. He was the son of poor Italian immigrants, raised in the rough streets of Brooklyn, New York, where crime was a way of life, not a choice. Capone dropped out of school at just 14 years old after punching a teacher in the face. With no education and no future, he turned to the only industry hiring: organized crime. He started working for the 5 Points Gang, a ruthless group in New York's underworld known for extortion, robbery, and violence. But Capone wasn't just another street thug. He had ambition. He caught the attention of Johnny Torrio, one of the most powerful mobsters in America. Torrio saw something in Capone: a natural leader with a mind for business and a stomach for violence. Capone started off doing small jobs, beating up debtors, running bootlegging operations, and acting as a lookout during hits. His reputation grew when he worked as a bouncer at the Harvard Inn, a nightclub owned by mobster Frankie Yale. It was there that he got the nickname that would haunt him forever: Scarface. One night, Capone insulted a gangster's sister, and the man slashed Capone's face 3 times with a knife, leaving him with the infamous scars. Capone hated the nickname, always covering his scars with powder and photos, and insisting people call him Big Al instead. Despite the injury, Capone's toughness earned him even more respect among the gangsters. But in New York, power was limited. Too many gangs, too many rivals. If Capone wanted to rise, he needed a new city. At 19, Capone got a little too violent for New York. After nearly beating a man to death in a bar fight, he became a wanted man. Torrio knew Capone had potential, but told him he had to lay low or get killed. So Torrio brought Capone to the Windy City, Chicago, a place where crime was booming under Prohibition. Chicago was wide open: corrupt police, weak politicians, and a public desperate for alcohol. It was the perfect playground for organized crime. In 1924, a Chicago mayoral candidate, William Dever, promised to clean up the city. But a crime-free Chicago was bad for business, so Capone rigged the election, intimidated voters, and secured his grip on the city's politics, the beginning of a long career in corruption. But Chicago wasn't just about politics, it was about power. And Capone was about to take it all. By 1925, the city was a war zone. Rival gangs, especially Dion O'Banion's North Side Gang, wanted him dead. The violence spilled into the streets, turning Chicago into a battlefield. That same year, Johnny Torrio, Capone's mentor, was ambushed and shot 4 times outside his home. He survived, but he'd had enough. Torrio made a shocking decision. He was retiring. At just 26 years old, Capone took over Chicago's most powerful crime syndicate. He expanded operations, crushed his enemies, and turned the city into a bootlegging empire. But now, it was time for revenge. In 1926, Capone's men gunned down Jaime Weiss, leader of the North Side Gang, one of the last major threats to his rule. The message was clear: Chicago belonged to Capone. With millions pouring in every week, Capone lived like royalty: custom suits, bulletproof Cadillacs, and an untouchable reputation. But with power came enemies. And as his empire grew, so did the number of people who wanted him dead or in prison. He built an empire, but he also painted a target on his back. By the mid-1920s, Al Capone wasn't just running a gang. He was running an empire. Where others saw crime, he saw an industry. He built a billion-dollar machine, complete with supply chains, distribution networks, and corrupt officials, ensuring business ran smoothly. But it all started with one golden opportunity: Prohibition. The 18th Amendment was meant to clean up America, but instead, it handed the underworld a billion-dollar business. People still wanted to drink, and Capone was ready to supply them. His operation stretched from Canada to Chicago, smuggling whiskey through speedboats, hidden car compartments, and even funeral processions. Because who would check a coffin for liquor? He built massive underground breweries, producing millions of gallons of beer and moonshine every year. Bribed truckers and railroad workers, ensured his shipments moved without interference. At its peak, his bootlegging empire alone pulled in $60 million a year. Over $1 billion today. But all that alcohol needed a place to go. Speakeasies, how Capone franchised crime. Capone didn't just sell alcohol, he controlled where it was consumed. Instead of running a few bars, he owned over 10,000 speakeasies, each one paying him a cut of the profits. To keep the law out, Capone introduced a password system. If you didn't know the right word, you weren't getting in. Undercover agents were locked out, and paid-off police looked the other way. Some cafe owners refused to work with him. They didn't refuse twice. First came the friendly offer. Then came the smashed windows and fires. If they still said no, their business was finished. To keep everything running, Capone paid police insurance, bribing officers to warn him about upcoming raids. With crooked cops, loyal suppliers, and a vast network of hidden bars, Capone wasn't just running an illegal business. He was making the law work for him. At its peak, Capone's empire was pulling in $100 million a year, more than General Motors at the time. His alcohol racket alone generated $60 million annually, approximately $1 billion in today's money. A single speakeasy could pull in $25,000 a week, about $400,000 today. And with over 10,000 speakeasies under his control, the cash flowed endlessly. Capone was swimming in cash, but he had one major issue. How do you hide millions in illegal money without raising suspicion? That's where his genius for money laundering came into play. FBI agents later found $20 million hidden in various locations, and that was just the money they didn't manage to launder. Capone wasn't just making insane amounts of money, he was making too much. Stacks of dirty cash piled up in warehouses, hidden in safes, and stuffed inside walls because banks wouldn't touch his money. So he had to clean it, turn illegal cash into legitimate income. Here's how he did it. Cash businesses, the perfect cover. Capone's first trick? Use legal businesses as a front. He bought laundromats, restaurants, hotels, and even flower shops, all cash-heavy businesses, meaning no one could tell how much real money was flowing in. For example, if a laundromat normally made $500 a day, Capone's might suddenly report $5,000 a day. With the extra cash coming straight from his illegal empire, one of his most infamous front businesses, Hawthorne Smoke Shop, a cigar store that supposedly made millions in profits, yet barely had any customers. The truth? It was a massive money-washing machine. Capone didn't just invent businesses, he invented people. His companies had hundreds of fake employees, each receiving weekly paychecks that went straight back into Capone's pockets. A small bakery that should have had 10 workers would suddenly report 50 employees instead. The fake salaries were withdrawn as cash, mixed with real business revenue, and suddenly, the money was clean. At the time, the government had no way to track payroll fraud, making it nearly impossible to detect. Today, billionaires hide money in offshore tax havens, but Capone figured out this trick a century ago. He funneled cash through banks in the Bahamas and Cuba, where US tax laws didn't apply. He also sent millions to Swiss bank accounts, where secrecy laws ensured no one could track his fortune. Some historians believe Capone still has hidden money sitting in offshore accounts, untouched for decades, bribing banks, cops, and judges. Capone didn't just avoid the law, he bought it. Cops were paid thousands to ignore suspicious cash deposits. Bankers looked the other way when fake businesses funneled in large sums. Judges were bribed to throw out cases against his financial operations. In one case, an IRS agent investigating Capone suddenly became very wealthy overnight, proof of how deep the corruption ran. For years, Capone bribed cops, rigged elections, and ran Chicago like a king. He thought he was untouchable, until forensic accountant Elmer Irie followed the money. $8,000 suits, $20,000 in jewelry in a day, $30,000 lost in a casino overnight, while officially earning nothing. The numbers didn't lie. Capone was making millions and reporting nothing. Why didn't he pay taxes? Because he didn't think he had to. Reporting his income meant admitting to bootlegging, extortion, and illegal gambling. He thought the government wouldn't come after him for paperwork. But the IRS didn't need to prove where his money came from, only that he had it and wasn't paying. A forensic audit exposed $215,000 in unpaid taxes, over $3 million today, proving his lavish lifestyle didn't match his reported income. On October 17, 1931, Capone, the man behind a billion-dollar crime empire, was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, not for murder, extortion, or bootlegging, for not paying taxes. Capone tried to bribe the jury, but the judge swapped them out last minute. He offered to pay $5 million in back taxes, about $90 million today. The judge refused, but his money laundering tricks, they never disappeared. Drug cartels use fake businesses, just like Capone did. Corporations manipulate payrolls, a method Capone perfected a century ago. The game hasn't changed, only the players. Capone may have fallen, but his financial tricks live on. And for nearly a decade, he got away with it all. Like this video and subscribe to The Money Game to level up your financial game today.